and undetectable. So he says it's because we get in this physicality, we get our life force comes from the constellations. There's a massive contraction from the constellations to bring the life force into Gashmias and make things go. And the constellations themselves get their life force from the Ayin Sari, right? The 70 ministering angels, and they get themselves their life force from the Shamrei Ofanim, like the waste of the Ofanim, right? Not even the Ofanim themselves, but just the waste product of the Ofanim. And Gavoa Ma'al Gavoa, and it goes higher and higher, like infinite dimensions, one beyond the next. Each one is just a tiny contraction of what comes before it. And where does it all come from? From the Malchus Yisborech, Malchus Kol Lamim, that all the worlds, all the kingdoms come from just one midah of Hashem's Malchus. It's like, in other words, even these infinite dimensions, they're all stemming from one tiny drop of Elokus. And then where does it really come from? So that's what enables him to suddenly, we call it like sort of a Yediyas HaShlila. You can't really know what the essence of Hashem is, but by realizing it's not this, and it's not this, and it's not this, and it's not this, you sort of brings to some kind of clarity this infinite level of truth of Hashem's eternality, which is not changing and able to be manipulated into one level after the next. And he sort of comes to realize that all the true energy is from the essence. So this is all, he takes this process of meditation because of his situation in the Mayim Rabbim. In other words, he never would have sort of longed to find his source in the same type of way had he not been thrust asunder and not feeling God. In other words, it made him turn into feel it with an extra strength and extra probing.
It's like an ecosystem, I guess.
So this is what we said. We finished the meditation, and we take it from the line that starts La'acher. It's about 8 lines down from page Tes. And it says, La'achre hitzbonus kol anal. You see that?
Not la'achre shenivra.
Right, and after that there's a period. And then it says, La'achre hitzbonus kol anal.
Right.
9 lines down.
Right.
At the period. Amen. La'achre hitzbonus kol anal. After all this meditation, Ba'omek hadas. And really going into it. In other words, Pashat's sitting there and thinking about it. About how what is it that you're looking at? You know, what is the matter at hand here, literally, and trying to deepen your understanding about the fact that it is Elokus in such an unbelievably contracted way. So what happens is your soul gets very excited when it starts to realize that there's an essence. In other words, what's really going on is that it sort of steps out of the ray. You see, we got to a point where we realized that all of the life force that you're experiencing is a ray of a ray of a ray of a ray of a ray. Where does it all come from? From the essence. The essence is not taken away. In other words, it's not contracted. It's everywhere. So suddenly you sort of come into a realization that this essence level of Hashem, which really is the source of all things, it doesn't get contracted. And therefore it's in the place that you're in. So suddenly you sort of open up a channel to the fact that if you're here, okay, on one level, this is kind of a difference between what we call Soviv and Mamale. On one level, what you're experiencing as Elokus is certainly just a small ray. But the fact that you're in existence at all, how is this existence here? There's an underlying force of essence which enables anything to be, right, at all. And so therefore you sort of open up a channel to the essence itself. And this creates a tremendous chuka, nifla, karish be'esh. Your soul gets very excited, and it longs with a wondrous, like a fire, to go out of this darkness and concealment of Gashmias, you want to cling to the truth. In other words, you having realized how far away you are, you want to come back. As the Alter Rabbi often says, quoting the Tehillim, who is there for me in heaven? With you I don't desire. Meaning to say that when it comes to the heavenly realms, I don't want anyone over there. In other words, that's just a contraction of you. And with you, anything which is not you, but merely with you, any ray of godliness, even if it's the highest level of godliness, it's all just a ray. I don't desire it. And basically, another thing that's happening here is that the meditation, like I said in the beginning, now maybe you'll catch on a little bit what I meant. The Alter Rebbe is not Pashut explain himself. He brings this meditation, and what does the meditation really do for you? So it seems like what's going on here is that the person realizes the difference between Hishtalshalus light and beyond Hishtalshalus light.
Right.
That's kind of what this meditation is. He climbs, he realizes that he's at the bottom of something, and then he kind of gets to the top of it. And he realizes that whether you're on the top or whether you're on the bottom, it's nothing. Because even the top of this infinite chain is nothing compared to Hashem. That's sort of the crux of the meditation. That even when you get to the angels upon angels upon angels upon worlds, it all comes from Malchusu Yisborech, which means the infinite strain of worlds is all just not really Him. So you sort of hatch this idea, realizing that there's something beyond all the worlds, which again, you don't get that meditation in your head when you're sitting in the higher worlds. Right? Because when you're sitting in the higher worlds, albeit that it's a very limited level of godliness that you experience, but you're happy with it. You're complacent. Right? So but really you have nothing to be complacent about there either. Right. Because at the truth of the matter, the tzaddikim yoshvim v'nenim miziv hashachin, it says they're only sitting there benefiting from a ray of the shachin. The whole Gan Eden, ha'elyon and ha'tachton is only a ray. You only sort of care that it's only a ray when you're at the bottom of the ray. When you're at the top of the ray, right? You're sort of happy just being. It's almost like the political, quagmire that we're in. It's like there's the middle class, the low class, the high class. In other words, the people who are sort of making, $1 million or so, the government is also oppressing them, and also is taking half their money. But they don't really feel, they're not burdened about it. They're not going to make a revolution because they're living the good life. But the guy who's feeling the pressure of that is the bottom of it. He's going to rebel. He's going to revolt. He realizes that there's an infinite amount of wealth and it's being hoarded. But so this is. It only sort of comes out that you get this feeling of resistance at the bottom. And so this is what happens when the soul dafka comes into a body. Right? It's happy when it's in Shemayim. Comes to the body, it suddenly has this longing to cling to Hashem Himself, and it says, "Who do I have in heavens? Now that I'm already clinging for some truth and some real light, I don't even want to go back to where I was in Gan Eden. I realize that that's like a farce. Anything which is not you, but is merely with you, I don't even want that anymore. I want the essence. The soul never even desired the essence before. So this is the chiddush of the Mayim Rabbim. They push you to get to your essence.
That's why they're called Noach.
That's why they're called Noach. Shelo yachpotz klal. The guy doesn't anymore want lo b'gan eden ha'elyon, or lo b'gan eden ha'tachton, but lo b'gan eden ha'elyon. He doesn't want the lower. He doesn't even want the higher Gan Eden. Shehem rak b'chinas ziva ara bilvad, because he realizes, he does this meditation. Then he realizes it's okay. It's higher than where he is, but it's just part of the pecking order. V'kamayim razal tzadikim yoshvim v'nenim miziv hashachina, right? Because he realizes that Gan Eden Elyon, Gan Eden Tachton are merely a ray of the Shekhinah. Ki'im l'dafka bo yisborech. He wants Hashem Himself. The kalel b'chinas mahuso v'atzmus yisborech. He wants to suddenly join the very essence of Hashem, something which is beyond the ishtalshus, beyond any contractions whatsoever. V'nikra b'zohar kodesh l'ishtava b'gufa d'malka. And what's the name for this? Since for the original Kabbalists in the Zohar, it's called to cling or to hug into the body of the king himself, right? Just not the garments of the king, not the words of the king, right? But just to grab the king himself. And this is called tshuva, like we said yesterday. Which of course tshuva, you mentioned it. A couple guys mentioned it. That this whole concept is like a Baal tshuva, right? A tzaddik also never really can serve Hashem in the way that a Baal Tshuva can. And for the same reason, he doesn't know any resistance. His whole life was in the light, so he doesn't even know what it means to truly long for Hashem, because he was never out of the presence of Hashem. Once you're out of the presence of Hashem, the way you long for Hashem is the way that a tzaddik never could. So he obviously finds some level of divinity that a tzaddik never found, because he touches the essence. Similarly, Shabbat dafka mitoka choshech, and you can only get this from darkness. Again, this is sort of, in a certain sense, one of the principles of Chassidus coming to explain the utility of darkness. The real achdus. What is Chassidus there for? It's coming to give us a truer insight into the achdus of Hashem. You could say one of the, if not the singular sort of function of Chassidus is to understand the achdus of Hashem. And what's the greatest challenge in understanding the achdus of Hashem? Things that don't look godly. In other words, it's no problem to understand how everything's one when everything's good. Right? Everything's interconnected, everything makes sense. When things don't make sense and they depart from the order of things, they look bad, then it breaks the achdus. It looks like there's, God forbid, like Acher from yesterday said, there's two reshuyos, there's two domains here, the good and the bad. So Chassidus comes to explain, really in the deepest way for the first time in Jewish history, to clarify this, what is the bad and how it's really a part of Hashem. So here we're seeing that it is the highest part of Hashem, right? In other words, through the darkness, Hashem shows you His true, innerst, deepest self.
Two domains?
There's only one domain, right? It's like the penimius and the chitzonius of one thing.
Right.
It's not truly opposing Him. In other words, the Mayim Rabim, which look they're coming to destruction and sort of put a distinction, a separation. It's really Mei Noach. It's really there to elevate the world, to purify the world. It's not another thing. It's the same thing that was happening when there was good. It's just a greater level of good, right? It's Gevura as opposed to Chesed. Gevura can look like something which opposes Chesed, but another perush of Gevura is that it's a mighty level of Chesed, right? And that's what darkness essentially is. And so you would only get this level, achieve this level, when you're occupied in physical, vain matters of the world. Like running around chasing your landlord, etc. These things which look like they're ripping you out of Torah, and they're taking you away from Hashem, that is the biggest aliyah you could have. Because it makes you long for the Beis HaMedrash. And it makes you come to the class, so to speak, in such a way that you have to struggle for it and push away all resistance. And your presence in class, let's say, when there's something pulling you out, is so much more valuable, and it's pulling out a deeper essence of your desire to learn, much more than it would be if everything's honky dory and you plop yourself down in class, right? So it's obviously there to help you. And Bechlal, what looks like resistance and opposition is lechatchila a gift, a very great gift that's given to a person. The only thing is what, as we said yesterday, stam being thrust into Gashmias, it doesn't do it for you. Even though darkness is higher than light, according to our analysis, just wallowing around in the darkness does not bring out the jewels and the hidden pearls of it, right? Because if you let the Gashmias stam throw you around without this stopping and meditating on it and realizing what it is and allowing it to push you to a higher place, then you're just like a victim of the negative aspect of it. It's like a Baal Tshuva. If you become a Baal Tshuva, is that when you tap into the value of being thrust into the world and being separate from God temporarily. But if you don't turn around and become a Baal Tshuva and put your money where your mouth is and keep the Seder, so to speak, then you don't capitalize on the darkness. The darkness still has that power, but you don't capitalize on it and you leave it unmined, as it were.
Wow.
So it's all about tshuva. The fisha yisra ora hu mitoch hachoshech dafka. And why is that? Because, as we said yesterday at length, and we described the different levels on it, the advantage of light is from darkness, right? So again, just in short, let's get to the two levels that are sort of Hasidic interest. This Indian of hiskafia and his hapcha. That hiskafia is subjugating the light, right? When the light is coming against you, and you have to do the process we just said. You have to sort of fight tooth and nail to overcome its effect on your life, and it's a struggle and a wrestling in your soul. That's called iskafia. That's an advantage that comes out of you, an advantage of light that came from the darkness. But then there's a higher level. You can actually use the darkness itself. In other words, you get to a point where, while you're in the midst of that dark place, you realize you can bring the Torah there. You don't have to run away from it and use it as a catalyst to find Torah. You can bring the Torah right into it, and you can transform whatever worldly thing you were doing into a godly home. And that's called a shliach. Instead of being in the bank, and the whole thing is a big pain that it's keeping you from the Beis Medrash, you're going to go and put the tefillin on the bank guy, and you're going to make the bank guy give half their money to tzedakah, and you're going to make a little Beit Chabad in the bank. Right? It's a whole different approach. It's called hishapcha. That the darkness itself creates the greatest light, the actual darkness. because God is found in there. You have to mine it out. You can either mine it out by sort of using its exhaust, its excess, or you can mamish use it itself, the highest level. Whatever happens, either way you look at it, that love that is forged out of the darkness is called love of b'chol miyodecha. There's b'chol levavecha, b'chol nafshecha, but in general in Chassidus it explains that that's just dealing with your heart and your mind, which are basically limited because you can contain them, and they're not bli gavul. They don't sort of bust out of the vessel. But b'chol miyodecha, your me'od shelcha, is basically going beyond it's beyond yourself. It's like berserk. You're going berserk. And this is what happens when the darkness is the only thing which causes you to go berserk. The only thing is you have to forge that berserkness into a healthy kli. Right? If it's just stam berserk, as we said, it's like you lost the plot. It's tohu, it's Esav, it's just wildness. But if you can harness that, then you can put that Esav into the base medrash, and you're there. Everyone else just sitting there because they had nothing else to do today. You're there with Bamish like an unbelievable koach that you pushed away the entire world. Your focus and your discipline and your amuna is much stronger than everybody else's. So this is b'chol miyodecha. Shubli gavul mamish. It's literally beyond limitation. Because once you go out of your boundaries, there's no end to what you could accomplish. Essentially, you've just passed and you've tapped into something that there's something called beyond the boundaries. Up until that point, you thought I have so much strength, so I'll utilize it, and this is as much as I can accomplish. Once you realize that there's something infinite inside of you, it goes on forever. You change the game. Shabbat dafka min hafuch shu hachoshech, and this only can be arrived at from resistance, the opposition, which is darkness. By the way, it's a good point to bring up. There's no such thing as Chassidus without misnagdim. Right? The movement came along in such a way that in order for it to come out, it had to have fierce opposition against it. And that's because it's such a powerful thing that it doesn't just sort of present itself nicely. It's a movement against all odds. That you're going to bring out the Penimius HaTorah. Not only there are Misnagdim in Olam Hazeh, there's plenty of Misnagdim in Olam Haba. Right? The whole heavenly chambers are against these teachings coming out. Because it's the end game. Right? In other words, it says that before the Baal Shem Tov's soul came into the world, there was one neshama who was sitting there, basically, the Baal Shem Tov, who was waiting to come into the world for a millennia. And every time he was about to come in, the Satan and all his gang would come and find a reason for him not to come in. In other words, there's a tremendous, because it ends the whole process of the world. Chassidus, if it's going to spread to the four corners of the earth, Mashiach's going to be here, there's no more darkness. Darkness wants to exist. So it's fighting tooth and nail with everything it has. Like as you see right now, as the Rabbi always says, this that we're seeing in the end of time, the darkness is so strong and mighty, it's because it's his death throes. It knows when this person knows it's the end, he gives everything he's got. What do you have to lose? So he pours out the whole thing. His nagdus is tremendous. But it's because the chele yeser, the power that it's trying to hold back, is a bli gavul power. And this is already indicated, Pashut, in the beginning of the Zohar, when it says that Hashem saw the world ki tov, and it says K'moshku tov ze malach hachayim. This Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is right on top of it. He says tov represents the angel of life. Tov ma'od is the malach hamavis. Very good is the angel of death. Because what is going to get a person to change their life in an instant when you think death is tomorrow? God forbid, God forbid. But if you thought today was your last day of your life, do you know what you would do today? You would have the greatest day on earth, basically. I mean, or you could always fall prey. So you could always just get depressed, lie down, and do nothing. That's like the guy who doesn't do tshuva. But the power which we invested, theoretically, if you were ready to stand up and meet your Maker on the last day of your life, the Malach HaMaves, it would infuse you with like kochos that you never had the whole life long. Right? Because it's going to there's a resistance is coming, it's going to pull everything out of you. So that's what it says in the Zohar. Good is the angel of life. Very good, and again that word ma'od, because it pushes you to an infinite, is the Malach HaMaves. Only by going with an opposition, or having an opposition, which in general is your animal soul. Don't worry, you don't have to wait for the last day of your life. You got an opposition all day long, which is your animal soul trying to oppose every good move that you make in Kedusha every second. But through this, Yecholim Labol B'chinas Avas B'chol Miyodecha. That's the whole purpose, in other words, of coming into this world, is to get one of those animal souls. As much as it's a nuisance, and you're not always up for the fight, it is your best friend, because without it you can never arrive at this level of b'chol miyodecha, which is bli gvul mamish, your true potential. And that's because the source of the animal soul above is gavoa yoser b'chinas nefesh elokis. Here we go. It's higher in its source than the godly soul. Believe it or not. Let's restate that. The animal soul is in its source is higher than the godly soul. Right? This nefesh elokami mal mamish. Right? It has something higher than it.
Is it because there's no distinction at that level?
No, there is a distinction. We're saying it's higher than it. And if you want me to sort of spell it out, it comes from this notion of what's higher, the Orein Sof or the essence.
I thought we could...
Essence. And can the essence be seen?
No.
So what's higher, darkness or light? Literally, what's on the top of the pecking order? Darkness or light?
Didn't we talk about that Nefesh Elokis comes from the outside though?
Nefesh Elokis, really, okay, at a certain level, I guess.
Within state of the Shtauschus. Within state of the Shtauschus, it's higher, the darkness, but the Nefesh...
Wait, the darkness is higher in the Seder Shtalshalus?
Yeah, in state of
Nefesh Elokis.
No, in state of Shtauschus, darkness is higher, Nefesh Bahamas.
In Seder Shtalshalus?
Yeah.
Seder Shtalshalus is sort of things as they appear to us.
Yeah, because it's mushrosh in the koyach of Blitvul, and in the neshama.
Okay, so that's you're talking about how it's mushrash, not how it's in the Seder Shtalshalus. The shortish of the thing is beyond the Seder Shtalshalus, right?
Yeah.
So in the Seder Shtalshalus, light is higher than
It
darkness.
expresses itself in here, in that way of being higher. Whereas the Nefesh Elokis, even though it's a family Mal Mamish, she goes through all these descents to come into those worlds. All those descents are in the way of Tikkun. Torah is higher than Tikkun.
Okay,
Right?
yeah. Seder Shtalshalus is like things as they appear to us.
Yeah.
Right? In other words, in the Seder Shtalshalus, what's higher, a man or a plant? A man.
Okay, yeah.
Right? So so in other words, what looks to us as dark is lower,
Yeah.
and what looks to us as light is higher. So in the Seder Shtalshalus, the Nefesh Elokis is higher than the Nefesh Bahamas. Right? But beyond the Seder Shtalshalus, you go into the roots, the source of the Seder Shtalshalus. Right? Then instead of the tree sort of coming up where the branches are higher than the trunk, you go to the root. It's the other way around. The roots are higher than the trunk, right? In other words, you look at things opposite to as they really are. So in the source of the thing, right? This is the idea. In other words, what's higher, like the branches, or let's say what's more chashuv to the tree, the branches or the trunk, right? The trunk is the very life of the tree. The branches are just an extension that come off of it. But if you go beyond that, then it's really the roots which are the source of the trunk, right? So the same thing is true here. Like what's lower, which is the branches, right? In its source is the roots, which is even higher than the trunk. You follow what I'm saying there? Missed that point?
But the root of the trunk.
You
is
got it?
also the
Yeah.
roots.
What's that?
But in the tree part, you said
Yeah.
the roots is also the source of the trunk. As well
No,
as
but that's underground, right? That's what you don't see. That's beyond the Seder Shtalshalus. What you see, right? I'm saying what's underground is considered beyond the opposite of way things appear to us, beyond the Seder Shtalshalus. According to the Seder Shtalshalus, the trunk is the most chashav part of the tree. I mean, chashav in terms of the fact that it definitely wouldn't have branches without the trunk, right? The branches are a product of the trunk. Let's put it like that. In which case, the trunk is like the godly soul, right? And the animal soul is sort of the lower part, the branches. But if you go to the depths of the matter, you realize that the trunk itself is getting its chayas from the roots, which are actually the source of the branches. They look like the branches, but they're the branches that as they are in their source, right?
What are the branches?
The branches is like we're saying, like look, in this analogy, we're saying it's like the animal soul. It's lower than the trunk, right? But the source of the branches are the roots, which is higher than the trunk. So the same is true regarding the godly soul and the animal soul. But back to sort of what we were saying. Again, we said the nefesh elokis comes from the essence. That's where you sort of threw me on a loop there.
Right.
It comes from the essence in a sense, because in a certain sense everything comes from the essence. The light itself comes from the essence, and not only the light comes out of the essence, the light is even in the essence, and in a way where it's like there's not two things there but one, right? So there's the source of the godly soul certainly comes from the essence as well, right? But we certainly know the concept that that nowadays, right? The animal soul is enlivened and gets its chayas from the godly soul, right? Who's calling the shots here, right? Your body's just a piece of flesh, and your soul is what's giving it life. Your body would be dead, chas v'shalom, without your soul, which is the life giver. But in the future, it's going to be the other way around. It's going to be something crazy, that the innate life force, which is in your goof, because your goof does have a life force. Excluding the soul. The proof of the matter is that when your soul leaves, your body's still in existence. It might be dead, but it's still there. So it has its own life force. When you take the soul out, it just reveals that this thing has its own source of existence, which is not the soul. The soul just animates it, but it doesn't give it existence.
Right.
So, but that life force which is in it, which is not its true power and nature, is not revealed in this time before Mashiach comes. But when it comes out and all the doors open, it's going to come out that the essential life force in the body is more powerful than the life force in the soul, and in the future our soul is going to be enlivened from our body. Our soul is going to get life force and aliyah and become and be drawing from the power of the godliness invested in the mere physical body.
Really?
The opposite of the way it is today. Yes. Because of how godly the body is, but right now it's just in a state of darkness. The Gabi, the Seder Ishtalshlus. In other words, the darkness of the body right now, it's not showing its true source of what the power of darkness really is. So it just decomposes. We don't see its true source. But when all evil will be removed from the world, Klipa will be transformed to its true status. It will be higher than the soul.
So is Asa going to be higher than Yaakov?
Yes, that's why when they had their meeting, if you look in the Torah Or on the Parsha, he was looking to Esav to be the Mashiach, basically, right? He was trying to. Why was he bowing down in all the different directions to Esav? Because he was trying to draw from Esav. Bowing down is also an Indian of humbling yourself before something greater than you, and a hamshacha of the powers of Tohu that Esav possessed. And had Esav actually done tshuva in full measure, where did Mashiach go? Har Esav, right? Har Seir. That's where he's going to stand and bring Mashiach, right? So there's a whole Indian of. That's what the Rebbe is after, guys. He's going out to Mamish Edom, and he's conquering Edom. Yeah. Right? I mean, it's no one else did this before, because the time of Mashiach Pasha wasn't here. We can go to the Goyim and be like, all right, cough it up. We want it all back now. It didn't happen yet. But now, Shlichus, it's like you're going and taking the French national anthem, like we said yesterday, you're going to make it a Hasidic niggin. That's it. It's ours now. We'll take it. The story of the Baal Shem Tov? He was going around he was always going around, amazing stories of his travels. He once came upon a shepherd boy who was like, he was whistling a little niggin and he was tending to his flocks, and he said, "Come over here, shepherd boy." He says, "Whistle me that niggin again." And he says, "Okay." Whistle the niggin. All the Talmidim were standing there and were like, "What's he want with the shepherd boy?" He says, "Okay, I'll pay you for it. Do it one more time." He said, "Okay, one more time. Here's another ruble." He said, "Wait a second, I forgot it." He says, "Okay, we'll see you later." And basically the Talmidim asked, what was the story? He somehow, one of the tunes of the Beis HaMikdash had stumbled into the side of the Klippas, and it went through the Ishtalshlus through history, and it wound up in this shepherd boy. He knew the tune of the Beis HaMikdash, and the Baal Shem Tov took it back into the side of Kedusha. He had to pay him for it, and he redeemed the niggin of the Beis HaMikdash. So this is what it is. It's like a birur process of taking all the lights of Tohu, which shattered and went into the other side. They went into the darkness, and slowly, Yaakov will dress up like Esav and sort of sneak out.
That's what Chassidus means. They're just awful.
That's why Chassidus is all about hafatzas hamayonos chutza. Yeah, and mind you, the Rebbe said, what is 770? It's not just an address of a building in Brooklyn. It's the name of the shul of the Nasi Ador. Mm-hmm. And the name of something in Kedusha represents its essence, and 770 represents the completion of refining all the 70 nations and all their pratim, that it's like a signpost of the world. We did it. It's done. The job is done. That's where it's a mini Beis Hamikdash, and it's saying that we've done the Ufaratzta. It's the gematria of Ufaratzta. 770.
Confusing to me. What I'm having trouble grasping is like the Nefesh Elokis is a Chelek Elokam Mal. So in some sense it has to be, in some sense it has to be completely.
Yeah, but that word that you left, you said it more perfectly than you could imagine. Chelek Elokam Mal is different than Mamish, because what's the Chiddush of Mamish, according to the Chassidus, that it becomes in a state of Mamashus. It becomes physical. It becomes physical is its greatest power. When it was just a Chelek Elokam Mal, it was not as great of a level than when it becomes Mamish. When it manifests and becomes a physical entity, this is when it becomes the essence of Hashem. You understand what I'm saying? So not when it was Lamaila.
So it's higher. So it seems higher than the animal soul in that respect.
But how does it become Mamish? It's not an neshama that becomes Mamish. It becomes Mamish because it joins an animal soul.
Right.
Right? When it becomes a physical entity, which only happens when you have an animal soul. The godly soul becomes a physical entity. Right? So that state of mamashus, in other words, when it joins its earthly home, that's when it's the essence. So what do we really see from here? That it's the physicality of it which gives it its real, yachas to the essence. Mamish. Menachem. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the Indian is going forward. Now we're going to get into a little bit regarding this very topic. The source of the animal soul is higher than the godly soul. As it says, right? It's already written into the Torah. Eila malachim shamalchu lifnei malach melech al bnei Yisrael. It talks about the Elufei Edom. Right? We're talking about Esau's progeny. And it speaks about them. These are the kings that reigned before there reigned a king amongst bnei Yisrael. So all the kings of Edom, literally, Begashmias in history, they had kingdom on this earth before the Jewish people made their first king, by a long way, right? They were the first masters of the earth, Begashmias, before the Jewish people rose up with their empire, and so we had a pretty serious empire going on for a while. We were mamash the kings of the earth, right? Shlomo and David, and it went on for a while. We were the most powerful nation on earth. It was a great time for the Jews. And before that, though, and for a long time before that, they had malachim, they had kings. And basically, why did it come out that Begashmias, they preceded us? It's because they preceded us Baruchnias. In other words, they have a certain higher power. Shubachinis Nefesh Elokis, the Melech Malchi B'nai Yisrael, the kingdoms of the B'nai Yisrael represent the Nefesh Elokis. Rak Sha'aydei Shvirus HaKeli, Nafla Mata Mata. Just what? So if they come from such a high source, and really, these kings of Edom, what do they really represent, by the way, in Ruchnias, the spheros of what? Tohu, right? Tohu, which is Lamaila higher than Tikkun. That's really where these kingdoms of Edom, the actual manifestation of these kings. It says Esav had Shisha Nefashos. He had 6 souls that came out of him. Those 6 souls were the 6 midos of Tohu, right? And they're called Nefashos. They're called Nefashos Lashon Rabim, a plural. Even though Yaakov, he had Shivim Nefesh Yardu Mitzrayim. He had 70 souls that came down to Mitzrayim. Even though he had 70, they're called by the name souls, Lashon Yachid, in singular. Because this is the difference between them. Even though they only had 6, they were already in a state of division. Right? Because Esav's inyan is that there is no Achdus. What is it? And in a certain sense, this is a very strong sort of theological understanding, right? This is where people go wrong. This is why there's avodah zarah in the world, and there's a certain like faulty svara behind avodah zarah, and it comes from the understanding of a misunderstanding of what tohu is. That basically, if Hashem has powers, which He does, we believe Hashem has different powers that He wields. Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, He has powers, and Hashem is infinite simultaneously, right? That means that His powers are infinite. If His powers are infinite, that means there's no give in them. If there's a give, what is the sign of basically, in a certain sense, weakness? Is that instead of being able to manifest your full self, what is a real king? That the whole world is the king's. A king who just is a king of a certain land is not a real king, because he's a king of another land who's going to beat him up and take his land. In other words, it's just a mamash, the king of the jungle. There's only one, right? It's a jungle. So this true, so Hashem, every one of his midos is a king. What, you're going to say that Chesed is not as much of a king as Gevura? God. So what happens in such a scenario is that you have different separate midos. Each of them is the king. So that's a big problem for what we call achdus. It's very hard to make one out of that. It's an essential concept of many. This is where idol worship gets its highest from. Because you're saying, no, this thing is the ultimate king. But this thing's also the ultimate king, right? And so you just start worshiping different powers, because ultimately Hashem's powers have no end to them. The problem is that there really is something even in a certain sense higher, of course, than Tohu itself. But Tohu is an awesome revelation of God. It's a revelation of God which is beyond what we call Atzilus, right? Because Atzilus is an experience where they realize there was a little bit of a flaw. Atzilus is also called Tikkun. Tikkun means let's fix this and let's fix it quick. Because there's a problem here. If we let Hashem sort of be as He truly is, that His powers are infinite and they cannot, they don't give for the place of the other one, then it's going to wind up being that there's a sort of eternal level of infinite powers which you cannot make out the achdus, so that they all present a oneness. So Tikkun is a very simple way to fix this. Take away the power of the spheros. If Chesed will find a place where it's not the ultimate dominator of the entire world, but there's a small island in the middle of the South Pacific that it says, okay, Gevura, you have it, right? So Gevura will now have a place, and Chesed, so Gevura finds itself, but Chesed is no longer the king of the whole world. There's one little island that Chesed is no longer the king of. So if you weaken it, you can find a place for another person. If you don't weaken yourself, you'll never find a place for the other person.
When Mashiach comes for those nations?
So I'm just saying that it's a strange parallel. So this that we think about Atzilus and God's awesome godly midos, in a certain sense they're flawed in order to be fixed. They have to give of themselves. They have to be not perfect. They have to be not infinite. The spheros of Tikkun had to give of themselves and find like a little place where they were not all powerful, in order to live together and allow a unity to be present. Is it what I'm saying making sense?
Yes.
And so therefore, it comes out that there's a greater power than the individual powers of the spheros. In other words, each chesed is, and it's all powerful, and Gevurah is, it's all powerful, but the fact is there's something more powerful than all of them, which is the oneness which produces them. So for that oneness which produces them to have its day in the sun and to like sort of put itself forward and show itself, it must weaken its powers so that the powers can all fit together like a little puzzle piece and show that they're all a product of something bigger than them. You understand what I'm saying? So Tohu is before that takes place. No, Tohu is before that unifying factor takes place. You don't really see God, the unity of God in Tohu.
Risky business.
It's risky business, basically. You don't see but for God it's not a problem, because He's not jealous. He's not self-conscious or of His oneness. He's pretty confident in His oneness, so He doesn't mind showing to Himself at least what Tohu is. That in the midst of this oneness, there are infinite powers which don't know how to mix with each other, and each one is a king simultaneously. Right?
More of a potential than Tikkun.
Because ultimately the oneness of Hashem at that level is not showing, it's in potential. You don't see it. And that's basically the state of our world. Bring it back a little bit to reality. What we're seeing is the jungle, right? Either this one's in control or this one's in control. There's no sharing, right? Or they when they try, they say, okay, you know what, let's get together with a kingdom of nations. We'll put together 190 countries and we'll share. Right, that went well. Right? It's all about let's gang up and destroy the one who wants to bring achdus to everybody. Right? So it's because what is that the tohu energy is what is in the foreground, and the background, what you don't see, is the achdus of Hashem. Because in order for the achdus of Hashem to be in the foreground, all the powers have to pull back and show their weakness and show where there's room for the other guy. It's happened la'at. There's a movement, at least. I mean, in the days of the kings, they weren't even talking about this. At least there's an attempt in the world for everybody to come together and pretend, at least, to make some kind of a united state. But This is the idea.
So when Mashiach comes, that power, that's definitely going to kick in much more.
No, so when Mashiach comes, you have mamish the opposite. You have the fusion of opposites. Somehow, and it's not something that the mind can understand. You have the power of the spheros of Tohu, which means nobody gives anything. Because again, if you give, you're a weakness. That's not the ultimate godliness, right? If Chesed gives the island in the South Pacific to Gevura, it's not really the Chesed Batara. He gave up his power, right? So in the future, you're going to have the full powers with no sharos, with no compromises, and yet somehow the Achdus is going to be there at the same time. It's called the power of Tohu in the vessels, the light of Tohu in the vessels of Tikkun. It's basically it's a wonder. It's a fusion of infinite and finite at the same time.
The midas are totally separate, but each one reigns in its completeness.
Yes.
Through the fact that they're separate. And
Yes.
the idea of tikkun is that there's compromise, but there's an ultimate tikkun where there's no need for compromise, and then they're all unified.
Yes. Exactly. That's why, by the way, that's why we call it Tohu, because trying to have two kings who are simultaneously ruling the entire world with no one over them, it's called chaos. I mean, that doesn't even make sense in a world of our world.
Right.
It's just but Hashem can handle chaos.
You know the Chinese letters for chaos? When they make Chinese letters?
What's that?
2 women under one roof. That's the name for,
No way.
yeah? Chinese.
Yeah. No, it makes sense, right? Because what she's called the Gevirta, right? She runs the house, right? It's the woman. The woman is the Keres Habayis. So how can you have 2? Right? It doesn't make sense.
There's a remnant to that in the pasuk. V'chi asachet zaras le'yakas.
Oh man.
This is also the union of the sun and the moon, right? It says in the beginning of the creation, the sun and the moon, which are basically 2 rulers, they were both kings. They were Shnei Ma'oros HaGedolim. They were 2 great luminaries, and it's impossible. This can't be, you know. So so the moon had to minimize. That's the union of Tikkun, right? It had to come down. But in the future, what's going to happen is going to be again the Shnei Ma'oros HaGedolim. They're going to come back, and it's a big wonder. But so this is the whole story of everything,
So
really.
is Yaakov really the moon? Who spoke Lashon Hara on the sun, and that's why he had to become the Ruchni, because really the greater is the Tashmi?
Not necessarily the Lashon Hara part, but yeah, in a certain sense it says Yaakov is called Hakatan, right? Yaakov Hakatan.
I mean, but so that really means...
No, it's really not the Lashon Hara, but Yaakov is the definition of Tikkun, right? Yud Akev. So in other words, he was the one who snuck into the garments of Esav to rectify the situation. It was that the sin of the moon was that they didn't sort of believe in Mashiach. Basically, it's like God was ready to bring it for day one, but it didn't maintain itself because they were like, it's impossible. It's impossible. It's like what the Rabbi says. Mashiach would come if you just open your eyes. If you would allow yourself to believe in the impossible, it would be here. So Yaakov came to rectify. He came to sort of climb inside and fix it from within. So he definitely represents the minimization. But Yisrael, on the other hand, his proper name is him as the son. His is the rectified.
I heard that the reason why Yitzchak showed so much love to Esau was because he was the title kid, and Yaakov was more the ticket kid, and so the reason why he was so nice to him and showed him so much love was because either he could go in the direction that he did,
Right.
Which Esau, he destroyed armies, he married like hundreds of women, like was the top. He was like king of the world at that time, kind of thing. Like everyone feared him. But if he would use that for Kedusha, he could go so much higher than Yaakov did,
Right.
because he was total.
Right.
So like who knows? There was unlimited potential.
Yeah.
But is it fair?
Potential of Mashiach.
Is it fair?
Right.
What's that?
Is it fair? Here Yaakov is trying to rectify the world, suffering for it, and, you know, and then it turns out that he gets neither this world nor the next world. Because after this world, he's just busy doing a tikkun, and he's not actually in this world mostly, because tikkun is a tiny part of this world. Then he gets to the next world, that's rectified, and then so he's basically the eternal idealist and never actually the guy.
No, because ultimately he's the one who is making the tikkun. In other words, the fact that the powers of Edom, or as we're going to call them, In other words, it's all about him in the garments of Esau. That's a very, very strong symbolism, right? Because that is the Geula. He's going to use the powers that Esau has, but he's going to take them where Yaakov wants them to go. Esau's not doing that alone, and Yaakov's not doing that alone. And who gets the credit when it finally gets done? When you talk about fair, Yaakov's the one who pulled that off. Yaakov's the one who got the bracha. Maybe he snuck it out, but he's the one who was able to take all these very major, heavy-duty powers, but take them where Yaakov wants them to go. Right? Which is basically, what is the garments of Esau? It's the animal soul, right? Yeah. And he's wrapped up in it, but if he's able to schlep it where he wants to go, he wins. It's very, very fair. It's the greatest gift you could give. He's the one who brings Mashiach.
Like the midget philosophy. Where's that garment from?
Let's go on a little bit.
Where did you get the garment from?
He got it from his mother.
No, but his mother got it from...
No, it came from Adam Arishon.
Adam Arishon.
Stole it from Nimrod. Stole it.
Yeah.
Nimrod stole it, and then he stole it. It's a very, very valuable thing. This animal soul. They were all trying to get it. Okay, so anyway, Shviros HaKelim. Well, I think we're going to have to. We have a couple minutes, but it's a tricky one to jump back into. Okay, so these are the kings that reigned before Bnei Yisrael. So this is what the Bnei Yisrael represents the godly soul. These kings represents the animal soul, or the spheres of Tohu. But what? They fell and they got shattered in the Shviros HaKelim. And therefore they fell below. So going back to what we just mentioned a moment ago, this Tohu world, where you have all these kings which are in their shleimus and in their ultimate perfection, but it doesn't, because it's in a godly world of Tohu that Hashem can do anything, it doesn't negate their fellow from being just as mighty and just as powerful. It's like, imagine if you had, if the painting was 100% white and 100% black at the same time. That's chaos to us, but over there it seemed like it worked out just fine. But what happens when Hashem is going to try to have applied sciences? He's going to bring that wondrous world of Tohu the way it is by, like, in a godly frame, and he's going to say, okay, let's make a world with that. So what happens when you try and fill a vessel all the way up to the top with water and simultaneously fill it all the way up the top with oil? What happens is that the glass explodes. It cannot handle that. And so this is what is called the Shviros HaKelim. That sort of fall off from the world of Tohu made it so that the feeling of I am the king of the world, okay, it fell down into every single piece of Olam Hazeh, that we have this Tohu type of attitude that we don't all fit together as one. We're all like fractured pieces that we don't see how we come together, and each entity who's in existence in this world feels that he is the king of the world. It's the feeling of Yeshus. In other words, so because that sort of Tohu type energy, when you try to apply it in a finite space, which is the world is a finite space, it comes out as like a psychological, set dysfunction that everybody thinks that they're the ultimate I. And this is what happens that the shvir. That's so in other words, when that sort of settles down through the Seder Ishtalshlus, it creates what we call the shattered experience. Shattered as opposed to whole. Right? What did we say was the problem with Tohu? That the unity of Hashem was in the background, and all the pieces of Hashem, as it were in the foreground. So that's what happened here. The unity of Hashem is in the background. And we call it in Kabbalistic terms the shattering of the vessel, as opposed to there being one vessel which holds everything, and you can see Hashem's unity. Instead, you see a bunch of pieces. And so this is called Shviros HaKelim. As it says, and we see this indicated right in those same verses which talked about the kings of Edom, Vayimloch Vayamas. It says that they reigned and they died. The dying of the kings represents their fall into a worldly state of separateness. But in truth, in their root, they come from Tohu, where the spheros themselves are more powerful, as we said in the spheros of Atzilus. Because the spheros of Atzilus, which is called Tikkun, they had to minimize themselves in order to get that Achdus to be seen. So their source of the powers invested in the broken vessels is actually higher, more intense godliness by a far than the weakened, dimmed down level which is found in the Nefesh Elokis, in Tikkun. V'lazos gam kamoshen naflu lamata yesh lem tagvuros al Nefesh Elokis. That's why even in this world, even though we're now in the Seder Ishtalshlus, so the godly soul is given more credit and is perceived as higher than the animal soul, a more important entity, still you can see the roots of the animal soul. You can still see that it's actually more stronger and powerful. How? Because it's stronger than the godly soul. It's a mightier beast. What's bigger, an ox or a man? Right, the man representing the godly soul. The animal is a powerful entity. So even though it's lower, so to speak, than a man, on one hand you can see it's stronger than a man. It's because it's showing its source. And why? Because they come from this level of kings, right? They were all kings. That's what they're called. These are the kings that reigned before. So a king is like, he's the king of the jungle. So each animal is like its own king. And so, whereas man, so to speak, is more shaykh to being softer, he can talk. The whole concept of even talking is like, let's get along over here. Before it comes to your horns versus my horns, let's just have a talk. You know, they don't have that. They just they're mighty warriors. And not only that, we can see also their source in this, that Adam's makabel chayus bechinas behemus u'maychlim. That not only are they stronger than us, we can't live without them. We literally take our life force from animals and plants. Because they fell lower than us, because their source is higher than us, they literally sustain us. Just like the spheres of tikkun are basically, in other words, they are the same spheros of tohu, just they're a little bit less. So in other words, if you look at it, it's like there's a big storehouse of chesed, which is infinite chesed of tohu. And when it comes to the tikkun, it's just a little funneling of life force from the chesed of tohu into tikkun. So who's in charge over there? The tikkun is literally receiving its life force from a ray of the sphere of chesed of tohu. So too in this world, we are receiving our life force from the lower aspects of reality. We feed off of the animals. We feed off of the plants, which means they are the storehouse of life. They're like the powerful tohu energy. And we're just, in order to survive, we're just taking them in. Otherwise we would disappear.
So from the ultimate perspective, davening is actually the mayim rabbim of the worries about earning a living. So
It's
that's really serving God. And you gotta daven, so because you have to take care of your spiritual needs. But from the ultimate perspective, a person's spiritual needs are actually the darkness that's teaching the...
Yes. Welcome to Chabad, right? This is like the philosophy. Why is the Rebbe sending people into the middle of nowhere? Why is that the ultimate? You know, if you're really a shliach of the, if you're really a chassid of the Rebbe, by other Rebbeim, by other groups, you'd be the Rebbe's gabbai. You would not leave his hand. Whereas if you're a real chassid of this Rebbe, you can't go far enough away from him. Right? Because the closer you are to him, the more you're failing him. Because he's going to send you, just like Hashem. Why did Hashem send us into Olam Hazeh Agashmi? Right? Because it's the greatest, it's not a punishment, it's the ultimate gift he can give to us. I'm telling you, it's a mind bender. Most people who do not study this, they don't understand the purpose of life. And I don't mean to be extreme, and I don't mean to be rude, for certainly, but I was just talking to a mamish chassid the other day. He came into shul with a shtreimel and payas, and he was like, I don't understand, why in the world would you teach chassidus to Bali Chuvas? Like, why would you bring such a precious Torah to such a low place? I said, cut those things off, save your beer, and then ask me that question. At least we can have a normal conversation. This is the theater of the absurd. That's what chassidus is, That's what chassidus is, taking things to the lowest level and realizing that in that lowest level is the highest place. All right, we'll talk about it tomorrow. Ooh, sorry.
Wow.
9 o'clock, guys. 9 o'clock.